At my husband's office Christmas party, his mother introduced his 21-year-old intern as his future wife to his entire company. "She's everything his current wife isn't: young, smart, and childless," she announced. The CEO laughed as they toasted, until I revealed the intern's true identity, and one toast that night cost them everything. "She's young, smart, and childless, everything Matthew needs in a partner," Cynthia, my mother-in-law, declared to the packed Christmas party, her arm wrapped around Sandra like she'd found the perfect daughter-in-law. The entire executive team stood frozen with their drinks halfway to their lips, watching this family drama unfold in real time. I felt my knees buckle as Matthew stepped forward to embrace Sandra, accepting congratulations from colleagues who'd worked with me for 5 years. They were celebrating my husband's engagement to another woman while I stood there like a ghost at my own funeral. But as I watched this nightmare unfold before me, my mind raced backward through the months of warning signs I'd been too blind to see clearly. Every suspicious moment, every strange behavior, every red flag I'd rationalized away now crystallized into perfect, devastating clarity. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing stories about women who refuse to be silently discarded. If you believe that marriage vows should mean something and that betrayal deserves consequences, please consider subscribing. It helps us reach more women who need to hear this. The signs had been building since early fall, subtle at first but growing more obvious with each passing week. It started with Matthew's work schedule becoming erratic in ways that defied explanation. He'd always been dedicated to his career, but this change felt different, more secretive, more personal. He began staying at the office until 9 or 10 at night, claiming urgent projects that somehow never appeared in any quarterly reports or company communications I had access to. When I'd offer to pack him dinner for these late nights, he'd wave me off dismissively. "Already ordered something with the team," he'd say, though when I called the office after hours to check on him, the night security guard would tell me the building had been mostly empty since 6:30. The contradictions were glaring, but I convinced myself there must be reasonable explanations I simply wasn't seeing. His personal habits shifted in ways that made my skin crawl with unease. Matthew started showering immediately after coming home, even on days when he claimed to have been sitting in air-conditioned conference rooms all evening. His cologne became heavier, more expensive, like he was trying to mask scents that didn't belong in a corporate office. He switched aftershaves too, abandoning the familiar woody scent I'd bought him for Christmas in favor of something citrusy and aggressive that made our bedroom smell foreign. The phone became his constant companion, never leaving his sight even during our most intimate moments. He'd take it to the bathroom, keep it face down during dinner conversations, and sleep with it under his pillow instead of on the nightstand where it had rested for 5 years of marriage. When it buzzed during movies or quiet evenings together, he'd glance at the screen with an expression I'd never seen before, excitement mixed with guilt that made my stomach turn with dread. Our credit card statements began telling a story I was too frightened to read properly at first. Expensive restaurants appeared with increasing frequency, places like Bella Vista, the Garden Terrace, and Moonlight Bistro. Establishments known for romantic ambience rather than business networking. When I'd ask about these charges, Matthew would spin elaborate tales about client entertainment and industry networking events, but the timing never aligned with his stated schedule. The receipts showed intimate dinners for 2 at 8:30 on nights when Matthew claimed to be in budget meetings that officially ended at 5 o'clock. The restaurants he was visiting specialized in couples dining, with candlelit tables and wine pairings designed for romantic evenings rather than professional discussions. I began secretly photographing each statement before Matthew could review them, building a collection of evidence I wasn't ready to confront. Jewelry purchases started appearing monthly, small amounts individually, but forming a damning pattern when viewed collectively. Delicate gold earrings from Meridian Jewelers. A silver bracelet from Crown & Company. Pearl earrings from Prestige Gems. When I searched our house thoroughly, thinking perhaps Matthew was planning surprise gifts for our anniversary or upcoming holidays, I found nothing new in my jewelry collection. These beautiful, expensive items were going somewhere else, to someone else who was receiving the romantic gestures I'd stopped getting months ago. Hotel charges became the most devastating evidence, though I desperately tried to rationalize them away. The Metropolitan Hotel appeared regularly, executive suites booked for multiple nights during periods when Matthew claimed to be attending crucial business conferences. When I'd call the hotel's events coordinator to ask about conference details, pretending I was trying to coordinate my own schedule around his travel, they had no record of any corporate events during those dates. The luxury suites were being booked under Matthew's personal name for what were clearly romantic getaways with someone who definitely wasn't his wife. The room service charges, spa treatments, and late-night champagne deliveries painted a picture of intimate weekends that made me physically ill to imagine. Cynthia's sudden increased involvement in our marriage should have been the clearest warning sign of all. She'd never fully approved of me, but her disapproval had always been manageable through polite distance and superficial pleasantries. Recently, her approach became strategic and purposeful in ways that felt like a coordinated campaign against our relationship. She began arriving for unannounced visits when she knew I'd be at work, spending hours alone with Matthew discussing topics they'd immediately stop talking about the moment I came home. During family dinners, Cynthia started making pointed observations about marriages requiring growth and adaptation to survive modern pressures. She'd mention other couples who'd made difficult but necessary changes to find happiness, her eyes fixed on me during these supposedly casual comments. Her remarks about my career became sharper and more frequent, suggesting that working women sometimes lost touch with their feminine instincts and family priorities. When I'd try to engage Matthew in conversations about our future plans, vacations we might take, renovations we'd discussed, or even simple weekend activities, Cynthia would interject with opinions about young people being too quick to settle for comfortable rather than pursuing their authentic dreams. The most disturbing change was in Matthew's treatment of me. The man who'd once sought my opinion on everything from his clothing choices to major business decisions suddenly acted like my thoughts were irrelevant background noise. He'd make significant plans without consulting me, change our social commitments without explanation, and dismiss my concerns about his behavior with patronizing reassurances that I was overthinking things or being too sensitive. Our physical relationship became mechanical and distant, like he was fulfilling marital obligations rather than expressing genuine affection. He'd turn away immediately afterward, reaching for his phone instead of holding me the way he used to. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the ceiling with profound dissatisfaction, like he was trapped in a life that no longer brought him joy. The final piece of devastating evidence came just 2 weeks before tonight's Christmas party. Matthew had left his laptop open on our kitchen table while he showered, displaying an email thread that shattered what remained of my denial. The messages were from someone named Sandra Morrison, discussing meeting arrangements with an intimacy that went far beyond any professional correspondence I'd ever seen. She'd written about missing him during his recent business trip to Chicago, mentioning specific details about his hotel room and their dinner plans that proved she'd been there with him. Her messages referenced inside jokes, shared experiences, and future plans that revealed a relationship that had been developing for months while I'd been obliviously playing the role of devoted wife. Now, standing in this ballroom watching Matthew accept congratulations on his engagement to this Sandra Morrison, I finally understood that every warning sign had been leading to this moment of public humiliation. The months of suspicious behavior, unexplained expenses, and emotional distance had all been building toward tonight's devastating revelation. But what I didn't yet realize was that Sandra Morrison's arrival in our lives had been far more calculated than a simple office romance, and the true scope of deception was about to unfold in ways I never could have imagined. That Sandra Morrison had been no ordinary intern became devastatingly clear as I stood watching Matthew celebrate his engagement to her. But to understand how she'd infiltrated our lives so completely, I needed to remember that first day she'd walked into our office building, the day everything began unraveling without me realizing it. It was a Tuesday morning in early September when I first laid eyes on her. I'd been delivering quarterly reports to Linda, Matthew's assistant, when this stunning young woman glided through the reception area like she was walking a red carpet rather than entering a corporate office. Her auburn hair caught the morning sunlight streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows, and her tailored navy dress fit her perfectly, the kind of expensive outfit that should have been my first clue that something wasn't right about this supposed intern. Every conversation in the lobby seemed to pause as she passed. Men stopped mid-sentence to stare, their coffee cups frozen halfway to their lips. Even the security guard straightened up behind his desk, suddenly very interested in appearing professional. Sandra moved with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're the most captivating person in any room, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. "Who is that?" Linda whispered, though her tone suggested she already sensed this woman would be significant. Within minutes, Matthew had emerged from his office, practically radiating excitement. His entire posture had changed: straighter shoulders, brighter smile, animated energy that I hadn't seen from him in months. "Ashley," he called across the reception area, his voice carrying enthusiasm that made my chest tighten with unease. "Come meet our new intern, Sandra Morrison." Morrison. The name should have registered immediately, should have connected to Walter Morrison, our company's biggest shareholder. But I was too focused on the way Matthew's whole demeanor had transformed in this woman's presence to process the significance of her surname. Sandra extended her hand with practiced grace, her grip firm and confident in a way that felt rehearsed rather than natural. "Ashley, such a pleasure," she said, her voice warm enough to seem friendly while her emerald eyes studied my face with uncomfortable intensity. "Matthew has shared so much about you." The comment struck me as odd because Matthew rarely discussed personal details about our marriage with colleagues. When I glanced at him, his expression carried the guilty flush of someone who'd revealed more than he should have. His face told me he'd been sharing intimate details about our relationship with this woman he'd supposedly just met. "Sandra graduated from Northwestern with dual degrees in business and finance," Matthew explained, his hand hovering near her elbow in a gesture that felt inappropriately intimate for a professional introduction. "She'll be working directly with our executive team on some specialized projects." Specialized projects. In my 15 years of corporate experience, I'd never heard of an intern being assigned to executive-level work on their first day. Internships typically involved basic administrative tasks, data entry, and learning fundamental business processes. They didn't come with immediate access to senior management and confidential company operations. Over the following days, Sandra's presence became impossible to ignore. Her workspace was positioned in the executive wing, directly adjacent to Matthew's office with clear sight lines to every important meeting room in the building. Her computer setup included dual monitors and software access that most employees didn't receive until their second year with the company. The IT department had somehow fast-tracked her security clearances and system permissions in ways that defied standard protocol. Margaret from accounting was the first to voice what everyone was thinking during our Thursday morning coffee ritual. "Something feels off about that new girl," she said, checking around the break room to ensure we weren't being overheard. "Yesterday she requested comprehensive budget reports covering the last 3 years. Asking specific questions about expense classifications and vendor relationships that sound more like an internal audit than typical intern curiosity." I'd noticed the same thing during our monthly department meeting. While other interns sat quietly absorbing information, Sandra asked pointed questions about cost allocation methods, revenue recognition practices, and financial reporting standards that revealed sophisticated understanding of corporate accounting. Her inquiries weren't broad learning-focused questions you'd expect from someone new to the business world. They were targeted investigations suggesting she was searching for something specific. "She's requesting access to confidential files that require department head authorization," Margaret continued, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. "But somehow she's getting approval for everything." Linda mentioned that Matthew personally signed off on clearance levels that took me 3 years to earn. The morning coffee ritual became the most painful part of my daily routine. Every day at precisely 8:15, Matthew would walk through the office carrying 2 cups from the expensive coffee shop across the street, his usual black coffee and an elaborate drink that hadn't existed in his routine until Sandra's arrival. A vanilla cinnamon latte with oat milk and extra foam that cost more than most people spent on lunch. He'd deliver this overpriced beverage to Sandra's desk with attention and care he used to reserve for special occasions with me. I'd watch from my position near the copy machine as he lingered by her workspace, engaging in animated conversations that made both of them laugh with genuine enjoyment. Their body language during these interactions was unmistakably flirtatious. Sandra would lean forward when speaking, Matthew would find excuses to touch her shoulder or gesture near her hand, and both maintained eye contact longer than professional courtesy required. The meetings became even more disturbing to witness. Matthew began including Sandra in executive discussions that had nothing to do with typical internship responsibilities. She'd sit at the conference table with senior management, contributing insights and observations that suggested she understood our company's operations better than employees who'd worked there for years. During presentations, Matthew would defer to her opinion even when it contradicted recommendations from more experienced team members. "What's your perspective on this, Sandra?" became his standard response to complex business questions, as if a recent college graduate's viewpoint carried more weight than the combined experience of his senior staff. Other executives started exchanging confused glances during these meetings, clearly wondering why an intern was being treated like a high-level consultant. Janet from HR mentioned during one of our casual conversations that Matthew had specifically requested Sandra be assigned to every project he oversaw, regardless of whether it related to her supposed learning objectives. "It's unusual," Janet confided. "Most managers want interns rotating through different departments to gain broad experience. Matthew seems determined to keep her exclusively within his sphere of influence." The transformation in Matthew's behavior around Sandra was embarrassing to witness. He'd light up whenever she entered a room, his face brightening like he'd just received unexpected good news. During team meetings, his voice would soften when addressing her, taking on an almost protective tone that made my skin crawl with recognition. I'd seen that expression before. It was how he'd looked at me during our early dating years, when everything I said seemed fascinating and every smile I gave him felt like a precious gift. Other employees began noticing the obvious favoritism. I'd overhear whispered conversations about Matthew's special interest in the new intern, speculation about whether their relationship extended beyond professional mentorship. The gossip was uncomfortable but not entirely surprising. Sandra's rapid integration into executive operations and Matthew's obvious infatuation with her had created an office dynamic that felt charged with inappropriate tension. What disturbed me most was how quickly Sandra had gained access to information about our personal lives. Through Matthew, she learned details about my background, my preferences, my daily routines that no colleague should know. Her questions, filtered through my husband, felt like intelligence gathering disguised as friendly curiosity about his family life. "Sandra was wondering about your accounting experience," Matthew would mention during dinner. "She's impressed that you studied finance and asked if you missed working in that field." Another evening, "Sandra noticed you don't wear much jewelry and wondered if that reflects your personal style or if I haven't been sufficiently romantic." Each inquiry revealed that Sandra was paying uncomfortably close attention to aspects of my personal life, gathering information that felt strategic rather than casually interested. Through Matthew's unwitting cooperation, she learned that I valued privacy over social activities, that I'd been disappointed by our inability to have children, and that I'd gradually become isolated from college friends after marriage. Standing in that ballroom months later, watching Sandra accept congratulations on her engagement to my husband, I finally understood what I'd been witnessing during those early weeks. She hadn't arrived as a genuine intern seeking professional development. She'd come with a specific mission, and I'd been too trusting to recognize that destroying my marriage was apparently part of her assignment. The systematic destruction of my marriage didn't happen overnight. What I witnessed over the following weeks was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation that revealed Sandra's true expertise wasn't in business administration. It was in human psychology and strategic deception. Her approach to Matthew was surgically precise in its execution. Every afternoon at exactly 3:30, she'd appear at his office door carrying documents that somehow always required his immediate expertise. The timing was deliberate, during the post-lunch energy dip when his defenses were lowest, never when other executives might witness their interactions. "I'm struggling to understand these profit projections," she'd say, her voice carrying just enough confusion to make Matthew feel indispensable while her intelligent eyes suggested she grasped the numbers better than most senior analysts. She'd lean across his desk to point at specific figures, her expensive perfume filling the office space and lingering long after she departed. I'd watch these performances through the glass partition separating Matthew's office from the main workspace, my stomach churning as Sandra executed her daily theater of helplessness. She'd tilt her head at precisely the right angle to catch the afternoon light streaming through his windows, making her auburn hair shimmer as she listened to his explanations with theatrical fascination. Her note-taking was elaborate and unnecessary, as if his every word deserved preservation for future reference. "Matthew is such a brilliant mentor," she'd announced to nearby colleagues within his earshot, her voice carrying clearly across the office floor. "I'm learning more from him in 1 week than I did in 4 years of business school. He has this gift for making complex concepts seem effortless." The flattery was calculated and relentless, designed to make Matthew feel like an exceptional teacher rather than a married man being seduced by someone young enough to be his daughter. Sandra's questions revealed sophisticated understanding of corporate finance that contradicted her supposed need for basic instruction, but Matthew was too intoxicated by her attention to notice the contradiction. Her conquest of Cynthia was even more impressive in its thoroughness and strategic planning. During that second family dinner, Sandra arrived with white roses, Cynthia's favorite flowers, information I'd never shared with anyone at Matthew's workplace. She complimented the floral centerpiece with genuine-seeming appreciation while asking detailed questions about gardening techniques that revealed extensive research into my mother-in-law's hobbies. "These dahlias are absolutely magnificent," Sandra said, examining Cynthia's prized blooms with the reverence of a devoted student. "I've been attempting to cultivate them in my apartment, but I can't achieve the right soil conditions. Do you think pH balance might be the issue?" Cynthia practically glowed with pleasure at discovering someone who shared her passion for horticulture. For 45 minutes she explained soil composition, fertilization schedules, and pest management while Sandra absorbed every word with the devotion of a disciple learning from a master. I sat there realizing Sandra had identified the fastest route to Cynthia's affections, through her garden and her desperate need to feel valuable and respected. "You should visit this weekend," Cynthia offered spontaneously. "I could show you my greenhouse setup and provide some dahlia bulbs for you to try in properly prepared soil." Sandra's acceptance was gracious and enthusiastic, establishing a relationship that effectively circumvented me entirely. Within weeks she was visiting Cynthia twice weekly, assisting with garden maintenance while engaging in conversations about traditional family values, proper marriage dynamics, and the importance of finding partners who appreciated domestic stability over career ambition. The coffee break intelligence gathering was where Sandra demonstrated her most sophisticated psychological manipulation skills. She timed these encounters to coincide with Matthew's moments of maximum vulnerability, immediately after challenging board meetings, before major presentations, during periods when quarterly numbers weren't meeting projected targets. Her approach appeared spontaneous but was clearly systematic. "You look absolutely exhausted," she'd say with concerned compassion, materializing beside his desk precisely when he was massaging his temples after particularly difficult conference calls. "Is everything manageable? You've been shouldering such tremendous responsibility lately." Matthew, feeling underappreciated at home and overwhelmed by professional pressures, began sharing intimate details about our marriage that no employee should ever hear from their supervisor. Sandra listened with perfect attention, offering sympathy and understanding that made him feel heard and validated in ways he claimed I no longer provided. "Ashley doesn't comprehend the pressures of executive leadership," he'd confide during these manufactured intimate conversations. "She expects business success to happen automatically, without understanding the sacrifices and risks involved. Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the entire weight of our future alone." Sandra's responses were masterfully crafted to validate his grievances while positioning herself as the ideal solution to his problems. "You work incredibly hard to provide security for your family," she'd respond softly. "It must be frustrating when that dedication goes unrecognized. You deserve a partner who understands your ambitions and actively supports your dreams." Through these carefully orchestrated discussions, Sandra learned that Matthew felt trapped by domestic obligations, worried about his professional competence compared to younger executives, and desperately craved recognition for achievements that seemed invisible at home. She positioned herself as everything I supposedly wasn't: young enough to energize him, ambitious enough to match his drive, and grateful enough to appreciate his efforts. The expense fraud became increasingly audacious as Sandra's influence over Matthew's judgment grew stronger. Romantic dinners at exclusive restaurants appeared on company credit cards as client entertainment, despite the establishments specializing in couples dining rather than business networking. Weekend getaways to luxury resorts were classified as professional development retreats, at locations that offered no educational programs during the specified dates. A $2,000 shopping expedition to designer boutiques became a wardrobe consultation for client-facing presentations. Diamond earrings worth $1,200 were justified as employee recognition awards for exceptional performance on projects Sandra had contributed virtually nothing to. A weekend at the Four Seasons was categorized as a strategic planning workshop Two people who somehow required 24-hour room service and couples spa treatments to develop quarterly objectives. When the accounting department questioned these suspicious expenses, Matthew became defensive and agitated, lecturing anyone who challenged these charges about the importance of employee development, relationship building, and creating positive workplace culture. He'd justify every fraudulent expense as necessary investment in Sandra's professional growth, apparently oblivious to how these explanations sounded to colleagues who understood basic ethical boundaries. Sandra's elevation from intern to unofficial executive happened so gradually that most employees didn't recognize how dramatically her role had expanded until her transformation was already complete. Her business cards suddenly identified her as a strategic development consultant, rather than a temporary intern. She began scheduling high-level meetings independently, using Matthew's authority to arrange appointments with major vendors and potential clients as if she'd been granted official power of attorney. Other departments started directing complex operational questions to Sandra when Matthew was unavailable, treating her like she possessed decision-making authority that had never been formally granted or announced. She attended industry conferences as our company's official representative, networking with competitors and potential partners while distributing business cards that suggested she held senior management responsibilities. Her workspace relocated from the intern area to the executive wing, positioned where she could monitor Matthew's meetings while maintaining constant visual contact with his office throughout each day. She acquired premium technology, advanced software access, and administrative support that junior employees typically waited years to receive. Sandra had systematically installed herself as Matthew's business partner while maintaining the elaborate fiction that she was simply an eager intern learning corporate procedures. The deception was so comprehensive that even I began questioning whether Matthew had received a promotion requiring this level of executive assistance, until I realized no such advancement had ever been announced or approved by our board of directors. By early December, Sandra's integration into our personal and professional lives felt complete. She'd become Cynthia's gardening protégé and confidant, Matthew's indispensable business partner and emotional support system, and the office favorite who somehow managed every project while maintaining her innocent intern facade. Her web of influence had expanded to encompass every aspect of Matthew's world, leaving me increasingly isolated and irrelevant. The holiday season was approaching, and Cynthia had already begun making elaborate plans for the annual company Christmas party. But this year her excitement about the event carried an intensity that felt different from typical holiday enthusiasm. Her phone calls became more frequent, her planning more detailed, and her references to special announcements and important celebrations more pointed. Something significant was being orchestrated for that party, and I had the sinking feeling that Sandra's months of careful manipulation were building toward a climactic moment that would change everything forever. My sinking feeling about the Christmas party proved accurate as Cynthia's planning reached levels of obsessive detail that alarmed even her closest friends. The woman who'd previously delegated party arrangements to event coordinators was now personally inspecting every napkin fold and testing multiple sound system configurations to ensure perfect acoustics throughout the hotel ballroom. "The lighting has to create exactly the right atmosphere," she explained during one of her daily planning calls, her voice trembling with nervous energy. "I've arranged for additional spotlights near the head table so everyone can see clearly when the important moments happen." Her emphasis on important moments sent chills down my spine, though she refused to elaborate when I asked what she meant. The guest list became her consuming project, revised and refined dozens of times over 3 weeks. She'd call Matthew at work to discuss whether specific clients should attend, whether certain employees deserved invitations, and how many tables would be needed to accommodate everyone she deemed essential witnesses. I watched her spread seating charts across our dining room table like a military strategist planning a crucial campaign, using colored markers to indicate different categories of attendees. "Sandra needs to be positioned where everyone can see her clearly," Cynthia muttered while adjusting place cards for the 5th time that evening. "She should sit between Matthew and Walter Morrison so she's part of the executive conversation." When I pointed out that interns traditionally sat with other junior employees, Cynthia waved away my concern with impatient irritation. "Sandra isn't like other interns. She deserves recognition for her contributions to the company's success." Her excitement about the party felt different from normal holiday enthusiasm. This carried the electric anticipation of someone orchestrating a performance where every element had been carefully choreographed for maximum impact. She'd test different microphone positions to ensure her voice would carry clearly throughout the ballroom, practice walking routes between tables to time her movements perfectly, and even rehearse gestures and facial expressions in front of our hallway mirror. Matthew's behavior during these pre-party weeks became increasingly erratic in ways that made our house feel like it contained a ticking time bomb. He'd pace our living room while conducting whispered phone conversations, his voice dropping to barely audible murmurs whenever I appeared in doorways. His usual appetite vanished completely. I'd prepare his favorite meals only to watch him push food around his plate while staring into space with an expression of profound anxiety mixed with anticipation. Sleep became impossible for him. I'd wake at 2 or 3 in the morning to find his side of the bed empty, eventually discovering him sitting in his home office staring at documents spread across his desk. When I'd approach to ask what was wrong, he'd quickly shuffle papers into folders and slam his laptop shut, insisting everything was fine while his hands shook with obvious nervous tension. His work performance began suffering noticeably. Colleagues mentioned his distracted behavior during important presentations, his inability to focus during budget meetings, and his tendency to forget crucial details about ongoing projects. The confident executive who'd once commanded respect through competence and decisiveness had been replaced by someone who seemed constantly on edge, as if carrying secrets that were physically exhausting to maintain. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked one evening after watching him stare at his dinner plate for 20 minutes without taking a single bite. "You seem incredibly stressed about something." "Just work pressures," he'd snap, then immediately apologize for his harsh tone. "Sorry, I'm fine. Everything's under control." But his trembling hands and the dark circles under his eyes suggested nothing was under control. Sandra's confidence during this period reached almost insufferable levels. She walked through the office like someone who'd already received a promotion that hadn't been publicly announced, her posture straight with satisfaction and her smile carrying a smugness that made my stomach turn with dread. During casual conversations with other employees, she'd make cryptic references to exciting changes ahead and new developments that would surprise everyone. "I have such a bright future with this company," she'd tell anyone who'd listen, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who possessed inside information about decisions that hadn't been made public yet. When colleagues asked about her post-internship plans, she'd smile mysteriously and hint that her role might be evolving in ways that would benefit everyone involved. Her wardrobe underwent a dramatic transformation during these weeks, shifting from appropriate intern attire to outfits that belonged in executive boardrooms rather than entry-level positions. Designer dresses, expensive jewelry, and professional accessories that cost more than most junior employees earned in a month. She was dressing for a role she hadn't been officially offered, as if her promotion was already guaranteed and she was simply waiting for the public announcement. The most disturbing aspect of these weeks was how the office atmosphere changed around me. Conversations would stop mid-sentence when I entered break rooms, followed by awkward smiles and obvious topic changes that fooled absolutely no one. Margaret from accounting, who'd been my coffee companion for 2 years, suddenly became unavailable for our usual morning chats. Janet from HR avoided making eye contact during meetings, her warm greetings replaced by polite nods and hasty exits. I began noticing colleagues glancing between Matthew and Sandra with knowing expressions that suggested they understood something I was missing. The whispers followed me through hallways, conversations that ceased so abruptly when I approached that the resulting silence felt heavy with unspoken knowledge. Some coworkers started treating me with premature sympathy, their kindness carrying an undertone of pity that made me want to demand explanations no one seemed willing to provide. The most frightening part was Matthew's complete obliviousness to these changed dynamics. He was so absorbed in whatever secret plans were consuming his thoughts that he couldn't see how obviously his colleagues had become aware of his situation. The man who'd once been politically astute and socially aware had become so focused on his private drama that he'd lost all perspective on how his behavior appeared to others. Walter Morrison's presence at company events increased dramatically during this period, though his attendance felt more investigative than social. He'd position himself strategically to observe Matthew and Sandra's interactions without appearing obvious, his experienced businessman's smile never quite reaching his eyes when he watched their exchanges. During presentations, his questions became increasingly pointed and specific, probing into areas of Matthew's responsibilities with laser-like precision that suggested he was building a comprehensive case. I caught him photographing documents with his phone during the quarterly review meeting, quickly pocketing the device when he noticed my attention. His conversations with other employees seemed designed to extract information rather than maintain social pleasantries, though his subjects appeared unaware they were being systematically interviewed about Matthew's professional performance and personal behavior. His attention to Sandra felt particularly intense. He'd watch her movements around the office, listen to her conversations with other employees, and ask subtle questions about her background and qualifications that revealed far more interest than a casual observer would demonstrate. When our eyes would meet across crowded rooms, Walter would nod slightly, as if we shared an understanding about something neither of us was prepared to discuss openly. His presence began feeling less like a concerned shareholder attending corporate social functions and more like a detective gathering evidence for a case that was rapidly approaching its conclusion. The hotel ballroom had been reserved, the invitations sent, the stage set for whatever dramatic revelation Cynthia and Matthew were planning to unleash on an unsuspecting audience. As the party date approached, I realized I was no longer just a wife watching her marriage crumble. I was about to become an unwilling participant in a public spectacle that would destroy everything I'd believed about my life, my husband, and my future. The public spectacle I'd been dreading finally arrived, and the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel buzzed with the familiar energy of our company's annual Christmas celebration, though I now understood I was about to become its unwilling centerpiece. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with gold and burgundy linens, while a jazz quartet played softly near the bar. The scene appeared identical to previous years, yet the electric tension I'd been sensing for weeks had intensified into something almost tangible. Every smile felt forced, every laugh carried an undercurrent of anticipation, and the air itself seemed charged with the promise of drama about to unfold. I arrived alone after Matthew claimed he needed to be there early for final coordination with the event staff. The lie felt transparent now, though I'd accepted his explanation without question hours earlier. As I handed my coat to the attendant, I spotted him near the entrance greeting guests with manic energy that bordered on hysteria. His smile stretched too wide, his laughter rang too loud, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie repeatedly. Sandra made her entrance like an actress stepping onto a stage she'd been rehearsing for all her life. The crimson dress she wore hugged her figure perfectly, its fabric shimmering under the ballroom lights as she glided through the crowd with practiced grace. Every head turned to watch her progress through the room, every conversation paused as she passed, every colleague seemed drawn to compliment her appearance or engage her in animated discussion. Her confidence radiated from every gesture, the way she tilted her head when listening, the perfectly timed laughter at mediocre jokes, the graceful way she accepted champagne from waiters who lingered longer than necessary around her table. She moved through the party like someone who knew she was about to be crowned queen and was graciously accepting early homage from her future subjects. Cynthia positioned herself strategically near the dessert buffet, her excitement barely contained as she monitored Sandra's social triumph. She kept checking her gold watch and scanning the crowd, apparently waiting for all the essential witnesses to arrive before beginning whatever performance she'd been choreographing for weeks. When she caught my eye across the room, her smile carried a smugness that made my chest tighten with dread. "Ashley, you look lovely tonight," she said when I approached to fulfill social obligations, though her tone suggested she found my simple black dress disappointingly modest compared to Sandra's dramatic presentation. "I do hope you're prepared for an evening full of wonderful surprises." The emphasis on wonderful surprises sent warning signals through every nerve in my body, though I managed appropriate pleasantries while my mind raced through possibilities of what those surprises might entail. Around us, colleagues mingled with their usual holiday enthusiasm, completely unaware they were about to witness something that would dominate office gossip for months. The marketing team discussed year-end campaigns, the sales department celebrated quarterly achievements, and the administrative staff compared vacation plans while the stage was being set for my public destruction. Walter Morrison arrived precisely at 7:30, his entrance commanding immediate attention from senior management. I watched him survey the ballroom with the calculating assessment of someone evaluating a business transaction, his eyes lingering on Matthew and Sandra's interactions with particular intensity. When our gazes met briefly, he nodded politely, but something in his expression suggested he possessed information about tonight's agenda that most guests lacked. The dinner portion proceeded with deceptive normalcy. Conversations flowed over herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetables while I sat with accounting department colleagues, trying to focus on their discussions about budget projections and staffing changes. My attention kept drifting to the head table where Matthew sat beside Sandra, their conversation appearing intimate despite the crowded setting. As dessert plates were cleared away, I noticed the subtle shift in energy that preceded significant announcements. The jazz quartet concluded their final set, conversations gradually quieted, and guests sensed something important was about to happen. My heart began hammering against my ribs as Cynthia rose from her chair and moved toward the small stage area where the microphone waited. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice carried clearly across the ballroom as she tapped her champagne flute with a silver dessert spoon. "I hope you're all enjoying this wonderful celebration of our company's continued success and the exceptional people who make it possible." Polite applause rippled through the crowd as guests prepared for what they assumed would be standard holiday remarks followed by the resumption of party festivities. But Cynthia's energy felt different from previous years, more focused, more purposeful, like someone about to deliver news she'd been anticipating with barely contained excitement. "Tonight, I want to take a special moment to recognize my son Matthew's outstanding contributions to this organization," she continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. "His leadership, his vision, and his remarkable ability to recognize and cultivate extraordinary talent have been instrumental in our continued growth." Matthew's face flushed deep red as colleagues turned to acknowledge him with approving nods and scattered applause. But I could see the tremor in his hands as he reached for his water glass, the way his smile failed to reach his anxious eyes, the subtle signs of someone about to participate in something that simultaneously thrilled and terrified him. "Matthew's exceptional leadership has attracted truly remarkable people to our organization," Cynthia continued, her gaze shifting meaningfully toward Sandra. "People who bring fresh perspectives, innovative approaches, and the kind of dynamic energy that propels successful companies toward their brightest futures." The room remained attentive but relaxed, expecting corporate praise followed by holiday wishes and dancing. Nobody seemed to sense the devastating announcement that was about to shatter the pleasant evening atmosphere. "Which is why I'm absolutely delighted to share some truly wonderful news with all of you tonight," Cynthia declared, her voice rising with triumphant joy that made my blood freeze in my veins. The moment had arrived. Everything, the weeks of planning, the secretive phone calls, the nervous energy, the strategic seating arrangements, had been building toward this single devastating revelation that would destroy my life in front of everyone I worked with. "I want you all to meet Sandra Morrison," Cynthia announced with radiant maternal pride, "Matthew's future wife and the remarkable woman who represents everything our family needs moving forward into the future." The silence that followed felt like a physical force pressing down on the entire ballroom. Every conversation stopped mid-syllable, every champagne flute paused halfway to lips. Every face turned toward the head table where Sandra sat glowing with victorious satisfaction while I stood frozen in the crowd, watching my marriage die in public. "She's young, brilliant, ambitious, and free from the complications that can sometimes hold successful men back," Cynthia concluded with triumphant satisfaction, her words echoing through the stunned ballroom like a death sentence delivered with maternal pride. The silence that followed felt eternal. I stood frozen among the crowd, watching my husband embrace Sandra while accepting congratulations from colleagues who'd attended our wedding 5 years earlier. The betrayal was complete, performed in front of everyone who'd known us as a married couple, transforming my humiliation into evening entertainment. But as I watched this carefully orchestrated performance reach its devastating climax, something inside me snapped. The months of gaslighting, the financial deception, the public humiliation, all of it crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I wasn't going to remain the silent victim in their scripted drama. I took a deep breath, gathered every ounce of strength I possessed, and stepped forward into the center of the ballroom. The movement felt deliberate and powerful, like walking onto a stage where I finally understood my role wasn't to be the discarded wife, but the woman who would expose the truth. "Excuse me, everyone," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent room with authority that surprised even me. Conversations that had been resuming in nervous whispers stopped completely as faces turned toward me with curiosity and concern. I think there's been some significant confusion tonight that needs to be addressed. Matthew's face went ashen as he realized I wasn't planning to disappear quietly from this scene. Sandra's confident smile wavered for the first time since I'd known her, replaced by an expression of alert caution that suggested she understood something was about to shift dramatically. The entire ballroom fell into complete silence, sensing that whatever was about to unfold would eclipse even the shocking announcement they'd just witnessed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced with growing confidence, feeling power flow through my voice as I reclaimed control of the narrative, "I'd like you all to meet Sandra Morrison properly, not just any Morrison but Walter Morrison's daughter." The collective gasp that erupted across the room was immediately followed by confused murmuring as heads swiveled between Sandra and Walter Morrison, who stood near the bar observing the proceedings with calculated attention. I watched Sandra's carefully constructed mask slip completely as people finally made the connection they'd somehow missed. "Sandra hasn't been working as an intern to gain business experience or to fall in love with my husband," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each revelation. "She's been conducting a comprehensive investigation into Matthew's financial activities on behalf of the company's largest shareholder." The room exploded into whispered conversations as the implications of my words began sinking in. Matthew's face cycled from pale to red to a sickly green color as he processed what I was revealing to his colleagues and superiors. Cynthia looked completely bewildered, her moment of maternal triumph crumbling as she realized she'd been manipulated by someone far more intelligent than she'd imagined. Sandra stood motionless for several seconds, apparently weighing her options before making a decision that would define the rest of the evening. Then she stepped forward with the poise and dignity of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment to reveal her true identity. "Ashley is absolutely correct," Sandra announced, her voice now carrying the professional authority of someone dropping their carefully maintained disguise. "I am Walter Morrison's daughter, and for the past 21 days, I've been documenting Matthew's systematic misuse of company funds and resources." Her transformation from seductive intern to competent investigator was breathtaking in its completeness. The flirtatious mannerisms disappeared, replaced by crisp professionalism as she reached into her purse and withdrew a thick leather portfolio that had apparently been her constant companion throughout this deception. "Matthew has been charging personal expenses to corporate credit cards," she explained with clinical precision, opening the folder to reveal photographs, receipts, and detailed documentation. "Romantic dinners at expensive restaurants have been classified as client entertainment. Weekend getaways to luxury resorts have been listed as professional development conferences. Expensive jewelry purchases have been categorized as employee recognition awards." The room remained absolutely silent as Sandra methodically dismantled Matthew's reputation with facts and evidence that painted an undeniable picture of systematic fraud. Her presentation was thorough, professional, and devastating, delivered with the precision of someone who'd been trained specifically for this type of revelation. "The evidence shows a pattern of deliberate financial misconduct spanning several months," Sandra continued, her voice steady and authoritative. "Personal vacations charged as business travel, romantic gifts purchased with company funds, and expense reports that consistently misrepresent the nature and purpose of these transactions." As Sandra spoke, Walter Morrison began moving through the crowd toward the front of the room. His approach commanded immediate attention, and conversations died completely as everyone recognized the gravity of having the company's primary shareholder personally involved in what was unfolding. "Thank you, Sandra, for your exceptional work on this investigation," Walter said with unmistakable paternal pride, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. "Over the past several months, I noticed irregularities in our financial reports that suggested either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud within our management structure." His explanation was measured and professional, but his disappointment in Matthew was evident to everyone present. The room hung on his every word as he continued with the authority of someone who controlled the futures of everyone in that ballroom. "Rather than make accusations without substantial proof, I chose to conduct a thorough investigation using methods that would provide irrefutable evidence," Walter explained. "My daughter volunteered for this assignment because her educational background in forensic accounting and her investigative training made her uniquely qualified to gather the comprehensive evidence we required." Walter's presence had transformed the Christmas party from a social gathering into a corporate tribunal, with Matthew standing exposed as the defendant who'd already been judged and found guilty by an impartial jury of facts and documentation. "Matthew Williams," Walter announced with formal finality that echoed through the stunned ballroom. "Effective immediately, your employment with this company is terminated for cause." The words landed like physical blows, each syllable punctuating the complete reversal of fortune that had occurred within minutes. Matthew stood speechless, his face cycling through disbelief, desperate anger, and growing panic as the full scope of his situation became clear. "Your access to all company accounts, facilities, and resources is immediately revoked," Walter continued with the efficiency of someone protecting substantial business interests. "You'll be contacted by our legal team regarding full restitution for the funds you've misappropriated, and will be cooperating fully with any criminal investigation that may follow." The same colleagues who'd been offering congratulations on his engagement moments earlier now stepped backward, instinctively distancing themselves from someone who'd become professionally toxic overnight. Cynthia stood frozen near the dessert table, her face showing complete mortification as she realized her celebratory announcement had directly precipitated her son's public destruction. The Christmas party that was supposed to mark Matthew's triumphant new beginning had instead become the stage for his complete professional execution, witnessed by every person who'd ever worked with him or respected his business judgment. But as I stood there watching justice unfold in real time, I realized this was only the beginning of the consequences Matthew would face for choosing deception over honesty, temporary gratification over lasting integrity, and public humiliation of his wife over private resolution of our marriage problems. But as I stood there watching justice unfold in real time, I realized this was only the beginning of the consequences Matthew would face for choosing deception over honesty, temporary gratification over lasting integrity, and public humiliation of his wife over private resolution of our marriage problems. The aftermath was swift and merciless. The festive atmosphere that had filled the ballroom minutes earlier evaporated completely, replaced by the uncomfortable energy of people who'd witnessed something they'd rather forget. Guests began gathering their coats and purses with unusual haste, casting furtive glances at the destroyed tableau we'd become while murmuring awkward goodbyes to their hosts. The exodus was telling in its urgency. Former colleagues who'd been slapping Matthew's back and offering congratulations suddenly discovered pressing reasons to leave early. Their warm handshakes and celebratory drinks were replaced by embarrassed avoidance of eye contact and hurried departures that spoke volumes about how quickly professional relationships could dissolve when ethical boundaries were crossed. "Well, this has certainly been enlightening," I heard someone whisper near the coat check. I had no idea Matthew was involved in anything like this. The conversations were hushed but audible, creating a soundtrack of professional death that would follow Matthew long after tonight's revelations. The festive holiday music continued playing from the sound system, creating a surreal contrast to the devastating scene unfolding below the twinkling lights and gold decorations. Christmas songs about joy and celebration provided an almost mocking backdrop to the complete destruction of a man's career and reputation. Matthew stood near the head table looking utterly abandoned, his confident posture from earlier in the evening completely collapsed. The same people who'd been buying him drinks and congratulating him on his engagement now gave him a wide berth, as if his professional toxicity might somehow be contagious. His attempts to engage departing colleagues in conversation were met with polite but firm dismissals that left him increasingly isolated. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," he insisted to anyone within earshot, his voice carrying the desperate hollow ring of someone whose lies had finally caught up with them. The expenses were legitimate business costs. My relationship with Sandra was purely professional until very recently. But Sandra's evidence folder had already done its devastating work. The receipts, photographs, and detailed documentation she'd presented contradicted every excuse he attempted to offer. His explanations became increasingly frantic as he realized that no one, not his former colleagues, not the company executives who'd once trusted his judgment, not even the catering staff who'd overheard enough to understand his true character, believed anything he said anymore. His reputation, carefully built over years of professional achievement, crumbled completely in the space of a single evening. The weight of evidence against him was so comprehensive that his protests only served to insult everyone's intelligence further. Each desperate attempt at justification made him appear more pathetic and dishonest. Cynthia had retreated to a corner chair near the dessert table, her face buried in her manicured hands as the full magnitude of her catastrophic mistake became clear. The woman who'd orchestrated tonight's announcement as her son's triumphant moment had actually provided the perfect stage for his professional execution. Her role in Matthew's destruction carried a cruel irony that wasn't lost on the remaining guests. Her effusive praise of Sandra's qualities, her public endorsement of their relationship, and her enthusiastic introduction had given Walter's daughter exactly the credibility and platform needed to deliver the most damaging blow possible to Matthew's career. Former friends and social acquaintances began treating Cynthia with a mixture of pity and subtle blame, understanding that her meddling in Matthew's marriage had created the perfect conditions for his downfall. The sophisticated society matron who'd spent decades building influential connections suddenly found herself socially isolated, her credibility destroyed by her own manipulative actions. Sandra, meanwhile, demonstrated remarkable grace under pressure as she methodically packed her evidence materials while fielding procedural questions from Walter. Her transformation from seductive intern to competent investigator was one of the evening's most impressive revelations, proving she possessed skills that went far beyond anything her colleagues had imagined. Other party guests began approaching her with newfound respect, finally understanding they'd completely misjudged her capabilities and motivations. The woman they'd dismissed as just another pretty intern seeking advancement through charm had actually been conducting a sophisticated undercover investigation that required exceptional emotional intelligence and strategic thinking. "I have to admit I'm impressed," I overheard Janet from HR telling another colleague. "The way she maintained her cover while gathering that level of evidence shows remarkable professionalism. We all completely underestimated her." Sandra's handling of Matthew's inappropriate advances and Cynthia's manipulative behavior throughout her assignment demonstrated a level of self-control and dedication that commanded genuine admiration from people who now understood the true nature of her mission. Standing in that ballroom watching my world reshape itself in real time, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions I hadn't expected. The vindication was both sweet and sharp. Finally, everyone could see what I'd suspected for months but couldn't prove definitively. Matthew's betrayal was no longer my private torment but established fact, witnessed by dozens of people who now understood why I'd seemed increasingly distant and unhappy at recent company events. But beneath the satisfaction of being proven right lay a profound sadness for the marriage I'd thought we shared, the future I'd imagined we were building together, and the man I'd believed Matthew could become. The dreams we'd discussed, the plans we'd made, the life we'd supposedly been creating, all of it had been fiction while he pursued his selfish desires at my expense. Yet underneath both the vindication and the grief was an unexpected sense of relief that felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for months. No more wondering if my suspicions were paranoid. No more questioning my own perceptions or gaslighting myself into believing his explanations. No more pretending everything was fine when clearly nothing had been fine for a very long time. The exhaustion of maintaining facades, hiding concerns, and protecting his reputation while he systematically betrayed our marriage lifted from my shoulders like a physical weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in months I could breathe freely, knowing the truth was finally visible to everyone who mattered. The Christmas party that was supposed to celebrate Matthew's bright future had instead become the public forum for revealing his true character. Justice had been served with devastating efficiency, witnessed by everyone who'd ever respected his professional judgment or believed in his personal integrity. But as I watched the remaining guests file out of the ballroom, I knew this evening's revelations were just the beginning of consequences that would reshape all our lives in ways none of us had fully anticipated. But as I watched the remaining guests file out of the ballroom, I knew this evening's revelations were just the beginning of consequences that would reshape all our lives in ways none of us had fully anticipated. Walter Morrison approached me as the last stragglers gathered their belongings, his presence both commanding and oddly comforting in the chaos of the evening's aftermath. The hotel lobby had become a refuge from the ballroom's devastation, its neutral beige walls and soft lighting providing a stark contrast to the scene we'd just witnessed. "Ashley," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been orchestrating events from behind the scenes for months. "I believe I owe you a comprehensive explanation about how we arrived at tonight's conclusion." He guided me toward a secluded seating area near the lobby's fireplace, away from the scattered groups of departing party guests who were still processing what they'd witnessed. His manner was both paternal and professional, like a doctor about to explain a complex diagnosis to a patient's family member. I've been monitoring Matthew's questionable financial activities for nearly 8 months, Walter began, settling into the leather chair across from me with the measured movements of someone accustomed to delivering serious news. The irregularities in our expense reports weren't immediately obvious, but patterns emerged that suggested either remarkable incompetence or deliberate fraud. His explanation unfolded with the precision of someone who'd been carrying this burden alone for too long. The investigation had begun when routine audits revealed discrepancies that couldn't be explained by normal accounting errors or system glitches. Matthew's expense reports consistently pushed boundaries while remaining just barely within plausible limits, a strategy that suggested sophisticated understanding of how to steal without triggering automatic red flags. I could have confronted Matthew privately, Walter continued, his businessman's instincts evident in every calculated decision. But men in his position are typically skilled at explaining away their mistakes, shifting blame to subordinates, or promising reform while continuing their destructive behavior. I needed irrefutable evidence that would leave no room for manipulation or negotiation. The scope of his investigation was far more comprehensive than I'd imagined. Walter's security team had been tracking Matthew's computer activity, monitoring his credit card transactions, and documenting his attempts to disguise personal expenses as legitimate business costs. Every fraudulent dinner, every unauthorized trip, every piece of jewelry purchased with company funds had been meticulously cataloged and verified. We have video surveillance of Matthew using corporate credit cards for personal purchases, Walter explained with the thoroughness of someone building a legal case. Audio recordings of him lying about business expenses during budget meetings. Written documentation of his attempts to manipulate financial reports to cover unauthorized expenditures. But the most revealing aspect of Walter's explanation was how carefully he'd protected my interests throughout the investigation. His team had gathered extensive evidence showing my complete ignorance of Matthew's criminal activities, my attempts to question suspicious expenses, and my obvious exclusion from his financial decision-making processes. Your divorce attorney will have everything needed to prove Matthew's infidelity, financial irresponsibility, and systematic deception, he assured me, his voice carrying genuine concern for my welfare. You'll be able to claim your rightful share of legitimate marital assets while being completely protected from liability for his stolen funds. Walter's fatherly concern extended beyond mere legal protection. He'd ensured that company records would show my professional competence and ethical behavior, safeguarding my reputation in an industry where association with financial fraud could destroy career prospects permanently. Sandra's qualifications for this assignment were exceptional, Walter said with unmistakable paternal pride. She graduated summa cum laude from Wharton with dual degrees in business administration and forensic accounting, then spent 2 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division before specializing in corporate security. The revelation that Sandra was a trained investigator rather than a naive intern reframed everything I'd witnessed over the past months. Her ability to maintain her cover while enduring Matthew's inappropriate advances and Cynthia's manipulative behavior demonstrated professional skills I'd never suspected. This wasn't Sandra's first undercover assignment, Walter continued. She's successfully infiltrated 3 other organizations where financial irregularities were suspected, gathering evidence that led to successful prosecutions and recovered millions in stolen company funds. Her transformation from seductive intern to competent professional investigator suddenly made perfect sense. The sophisticated questions about financial procedures, the rapid access to confidential documents, the strategic positioning within Matthew's sphere of influence, all of it had been carefully calculated to maximize her investigative effectiveness. When I realized we needed someone who could get close enough to Matthew to document his activities comprehensively, Sandra volunteered immediately, Walter explained. She understood the assignment would require her to endure uncomfortable personal advances and manipulative family dynamics, but she was determined to protect the company and its employees from further financial damage. The timing of tonight's revelation had been orchestrated with military precision. Walter needed Matthew to feel completely secure before exposing him, ensuring he wouldn't destroy evidence or transfer remaining stolen funds to hidden accounts. The Christmas party provided the perfect setting because Matthew would be relaxed and confident, surrounded by colleagues who would witness his downfall and ensure the story spread throughout the business community. Cynthia's announcement was anticipated and even encouraged. Walter admitted with the strategic thinking that had made him successful in business. Sandra carefully manipulated your mother-in-law's desires and prejudices, making sure she felt confident enough to make a public statement about Matthew's supposed engagement. The cruel irony wasn't lost on either of us. Cynthia's attempt to publicly humiliate me had actually provided the perfect platform for her son's professional execution. Her maternal pride had become the instrument of his destruction, witnessed by everyone who'd ever respected his business judgment. We knew Matthew's complete professional isolation would follow naturally from tonight's events, Walter continued. No company in our industry will risk hiring someone with his ethical violations, and his reputation will ensure that tonight's story follows him wherever he attempts to restart his career. As Walter's explanation concluded, I realized the evening's events weren't just about exposing Matthew's fraud or protecting company assets. They represented a masterclass in strategic justice, delivered with precision that ensured maximum consequences for the perpetrator while protecting innocent parties from collateral damage. The investigation had been designed not just to catch a thief, but to ensure that his punishment would be comprehensive, permanent, and publicly witnessed by everyone who mattered in his professional and personal life. Walter had orchestrated Matthew's complete downfall while simultaneously building a foundation for my fresh start, free from the burden of his crimes and deception. Standing in that hotel lobby, I finally understood that tonight's revelation was the culmination of months of careful planning designed to deliver justice with devastating efficiency while protecting everyone Matthew had betrayed or endangered through his selfish choices. Standing in that hotel lobby, I finally understood that tonight's revelation was the culmination of months of careful planning designed to deliver justice with devastating efficiency while protecting everyone Matthew had betrayed or endangered through his selfish choices. But understanding Walter's master plan was only the beginning. As I drove home through the empty streets, my mind was already shifting toward the practical steps I needed to take to reclaim my life from the wreckage Matthew had created. The evidence Walter had provided would be the foundation for my legal strategy, but I needed to act quickly while the momentum was still in my favor. Monday morning found me sitting across from Rebecca Martinez in her downtown law office. Two thick folders of evidence spread across her mahogany desk like weapons in an arsenal I was finally ready to deploy. Rebecca's reputation for handling high-stakes divorces was legendary in our city. She'd represented politicians, business executives, and celebrities through some of the most contentious marital battles our courts had ever seen. "This is extraordinary," Rebecca said, reviewing Walter's documentation with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every type of marital betrayal imaginable. Her occasional nods and raised eyebrows indicated she understood not just the strength of my position, but the meticulous care with which the evidence had been assembled. The financial records alone painted a devastating picture of systematic theft disguised as business expenses. Credit card statements showed romantic dinners at intimate restaurants charged as client entertainment, weekend getaways to luxury resorts listed as professional development conferences, and expensive jewelry purchases classified as employee recognition awards. Each fraudulent transaction was supported by receipts, photographs, and witness statements that would make denial impossible. "Your husband's actions have made this divorce incredibly straightforward from a legal standpoint," Rebecca continued, her voice mixing professional admiration with personal sympathy. "Most divorce cases involve he-said-she-said arguments about infidelity or financial irresponsibility. You have documentary proof of both, plus evidence of criminal behavior that puts him in an impossible negotiating position." The adultery evidence was equally comprehensive. Sandra's investigative report included detailed timelines of Matthew's deceptive behavior, photographs of him entering hotels with another woman, and documentation of his lies about business travel. The contrast between his claimed whereabouts and his actual activities was so blatant it bordered on insulting to anyone with basic intelligence. "We can file on grounds of adultery, financial irresponsibility, and emotional cruelty," Rebecca explained as she organized the evidence into legal categories. "The criminal fraud allegations will prevent him from fighting any of our claims, because drawing attention to the divorce would only highlight his illegal activities for prosecutors." The actual moment of filing felt both monumental and surprisingly anticlimactic. After months of emotional turmoil and uncertainty, The legal end of my marriage came down to signing documents that transformed my personal tragedy into bureaucratic procedure. Each signature felt like shedding layers of skin I'd outgrown, releasing myself from a relationship that had become a prison of lies and manipulation. "You're not just ending a marriage," Rebecca observed as I signed the final petition. "You're reclaiming your identity and your future from someone who was systematically destroying both. These papers represent your declaration of independence from his chaos and criminality." The relief was immediate and profound, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for months. I'd spent so much energy trying to save something that had already been murdered by Matthew's choices. Now I was simply making that death official and legal, freeing myself to begin the process of rebuilding rather than constantly repairing damage he kept inflicting. Walking out of Rebecca's office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of Matthew's secrets, lies, and financial crimes was no longer mine to carry. I was no longer complicit in maintaining facades or protecting his reputation while he systematically betrayed everything we'd supposedly built together. The legal proceedings moved with unusual speed, primarily because Matthew's attorney recognized that fighting would only make his criminal situation worse. Rebecca received a call that same afternoon from his lawyer, essentially a surrender before the battle had even begun. His counsel understands that contesting this divorce would highlight Matthew's criminal behavior and provide prosecutors with additional evidence, Rebecca explained with evident satisfaction. They're recommending complete cooperation with our terms in exchange for our discretion about the most damaging details. Matthew's negotiating position was non-existent. His stolen company funds had been frozen by court order, his employment had been terminated for cause, and his reputation was destroyed throughout the business community. He had nothing to bargain with except his willingness to accept whatever terms we proposed without resistance. The settlement negotiations were brief and one-sided. I would retain our house, my retirement accounts, and my personal assets while being completely protected from liability for his stolen funds or criminal debts. Matthew would leave the marriage with his personal belongings and whatever legitimate assets could be identified after restitution payments were calculated. "The divorce that could have dragged on for years will be concluded in months," Rebecca assured me. "You'll be free to rebuild your life while he deals with the legal consequences of his choices. Criminal prosecution typically takes much longer than divorce proceedings, so you'll have your fresh start long before his legal troubles are resolved." The empowerment of fighting back after months of victimization was intoxicating and healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. For too long, I'd been a passive observer watching Matthew and Cynthia make decisions that affected my future without my input or consent. Now I was making strategic choices, protected by excellent legal counsel and armed with evidence that guaranteed victory. The knowledge that Matthew would face comprehensive consequences for his betrayal felt like justice finally being served after months of injustice. I wasn't just escaping a destructive marriage. I was ensuring his actions would cost him everything he'd valued more than our relationship. Within days of filing, news of the divorce and its underlying causes began circulating through our professional and social circles with the speed of scandal. The combination of his termination for embezzlement and his wife's divorce filing for adultery created a narrative that painted Matthew as both professionally incompetent and personally untrustworthy. Former colleagues who might have given him benefit of doubt about his employment termination couldn't ignore the pattern of betrayal revealed by divorce proceedings. Social invitations stopped arriving, professional networking opportunities disappeared, and even casual acquaintances began avoiding him in public settings. The comprehensive destruction of his reputation extended beyond our immediate circle to the broader business community, where trust and integrity were essential for career advancement. Matthew had wanted to trade his stable marriage for excitement and elevated status. Instead, he traded his entire social and professional identity for temporary gratification and permanent shame. As I signed the final documents that would legally end our marriage, I realized this wasn't just about divorce. It was about reclaiming my right to live authentically rather than maintaining appearances that served everyone except myself. As I signed the final documents that would legally end our marriage, I realized this wasn't just about divorce. It was about reclaiming my right to live authentically rather than maintaining appearances that served everyone except myself. The months that followed moved with surprising swiftness, as if the universe had decided to accelerate the consequences Matthew had been avoiding for so long. Spring arrived early that year, And with it came a series of legal proceedings that would close this chapter of my life with the finality I desperately needed. The criminal trial began in March, exactly 3 months after that devastating Christmas party. I'd chosen to attend as a witness rather than a victim, wanting to see justice delivered with my own eyes rather than reading about it in newspaper articles or hearing second-hand accounts from Rebecca. The courthouse felt different from the family court where my divorce had been finalized. Here the atmosphere was more formal, more serious, carrying the weight of criminal justice rather than civil resolution. Matthew sat at the defendant's table wearing an ill-fitting gray suit that made him look smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the confident executive who'd once commanded respect in boardrooms and social gatherings. The prosecutor presented Walter's evidence with methodical precision, building a case that left no room for doubt about Matthew's systematic theft. $200,000 in fraudulent expenses, documented over 8 months of deliberate deception. Each credit card statement, each forged receipt, each fabricated expense report was entered into evidence with clinical efficiency. The defendant used his position of trust to steal from his employer while simultaneously betraying his wife and family, the prosecutor explained to the jury. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single poor decision. This was calculated, ongoing criminal behavior designed to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford through legitimate means. Matthew's defense attorney could offer little beyond pleas for leniency based on his client's cooperation with authorities and supposed remorse for his actions. But remorse was hard to demonstrate when the evidence showed such calculated planning and deliberate deception over such an extended period. I watched from the gallery as witness after witness testified about Matthew's fraudulent activities. Sandra took the stand with professional composure, explaining her investigation and the evidence she'd gathered without revealing any personal animosity despite the inappropriate advances she'd endured. Walter testified about the company's financial losses and the damage to employee morale caused by Matthew's breach of trust. Even some of Matthew's former colleagues testified, their reluctance evident but their duty to honesty ultimately prevailing over personal loyalty. The picture they painted was of a man who'd become increasingly reckless and arrogant, believing his position protected him from consequences. When the judge pronounced the sentence, 2 years in state prison followed by 3 years of probation and full restitution, Matthew's legs visibly buckled. The confident man who'd publicly humiliated me at a Christmas party was replaced by someone who could barely stand to face the consequences of his own choices. Cynthia sat alone in the back row throughout the proceedings, a shadow of the commanding woman who'd orchestrated what she'd thought would be her son's triumph. The months since that Christmas party had aged her dramatically. Her perfectly styled hair had gone gray, her expensive clothes hung loosely on a frame that seemed to have shrunk with shame, and her once sharp eyes now carried the vacant look of someone who'd lost everything she'd thought mattered. She never approached me during the court proceedings, but I caught her staring at me several times with an expression that mixed regret with something that might have been recognition of her own culpability. The woman who'd wanted to replace me as her son's wife had instead orchestrated the destruction of everything she'd claimed to value about him. My divorce had been finalized weeks earlier with terms that exceeded even Rebecca's optimistic predictions. I retained our house, my retirement savings, and my personal assets while being completely protected from liability for Matthew's criminal debts. The settlement also included provisions for ongoing financial security that would allow me to rebuild my life without financial stress. Walking out of the courthouse after Matthew's sentencing felt like stepping into sunlight after months in a cave. The weight of his lies, his betrayal, and his criminal behavior was finally off my shoulders. I was no longer married to a man who'd systematically deceived me, no longer responsible for maintaining facades that protected his reputation, no longer complicit in a relationship built on dishonesty. Sandra had parlayed her successful investigation into a thriving consulting career. Word of her professional competence spread quickly through the corporate security community, leading to job offers from major firms specializing in white-collar crime detection. Her unique combination of business education, investigative training, and proven field experience made her extremely valuable in a market where companies were increasingly concerned about internal fraud. She's probably the most sought-after investigator in the region now, Walter told me during one of our occasional coffee meetings. 3 different firms have made her offers, and she's getting requests to speak at industry conferences about undercover corporate investigations. Sandra had transformed what could have been a traumatic experience into professional advancement, proving that intelligence and determination could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. Her success also validated Walter's faith in her abilities and his decision to trust her with such a sensitive assignment. Walter's company not only recovered its stolen funds but also implemented comprehensive new oversight procedures designed to prevent future embezzlement. His handling of the crisis became a case study in effective corporate governance, with business publications writing articles about his innovative approach to internal fraud detection. The board of directors had unanimously praised his leadership, viewing the incident as proof of his commitment to protecting shareholder interests regardless of personal relationships or potential corporate embarrassment. His willingness to expose Matthew's crimes, even when it involved family-like loyalty, demonstrated the kind of principled leadership that attracted both investors and talented employees. Sometimes doing the right thing requires difficult choices, Walter reflected during one of our conversations. But protecting the integrity of the company and its employees was worth the temporary discomfort of conducting an investigation that involved people we trusted. For me, the most profound realization came not from watching Matthew receive his punishment, but from understanding how completely I'd reclaimed my own life. The woman who'd stood in that ballroom being publicly humiliated was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and completely comfortable with her own company. Matthew had thought he was trading up when he chose Sandra over me, pursuing youth and excitement over stability and commitment. Instead, he traded everything that actually mattered: his career, his reputation, his freedom, his family relationships, his financial security for temporary gratification that had cost him his entire future. I'd gained something far more valuable than any settlement or vindication. I'd rediscovered my own strength, my ability to trust my instincts, and my right to expect honesty and respect in all my relationships. The months of self-doubt and confusion had been replaced by clarity and confidence that would serve me well in whatever came next. Standing in the courthouse parking lot after Matthew's sentencing, breathing the fresh spring air as a completely free woman, I realized this wasn't an ending, it was the beginning of a life built on authenticity rather than appearances, honesty rather than convenience, and self-respect rather than social expectations. Justice had been served completely, and my new beginning could finally start. If this story of justice and revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Ashley revealed Sandra's true identity at that Christmas party, watching Matthew's world crumble in real time. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of women taking back control. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I am Amber Wilson, 27 years old, and last Christmas changed everything between my family and me. For years, I endured my mother's constant disapproval while my siblings basked in praise. Despite my success as a graphic designer, nothing satisfied her. When she announced to our entire extended family that I was the most useless child we have, something inside me finally snapped. Instead of swallowing the hurt like always, I stood up for myself. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you have ever had to stand up to family members who just refused to see your worth. Growing up in our pristine colonial home in Westport, Connecticut meant living under the shadow of impossible expectations. Our neighborhood was the kind where people compared landscaping and private school acceptances in the same breath. My father, Dr. Thomas Wilson, built his reputation as one of the most sought-after cardiovascular surgeons in the Northeast. His schedule kept him at the hospital more than home, but when present, his accomplishments loomed large over our dinner conversations. My mother, Julia Wilson, former Miss Connecticut runner-up, orchestrated our family life with precision that bordered on military. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair never moved out of place, much like her expectations. After giving up a budding modeling career to raise children, she channeled all her ambitions into us. Or more accurately, into my siblings. Ryan, my older brother by 4 years, followed our father's path into medicine without hesitation. Every science fair trophy and perfect report card received prominent display in our living room showcase. By the time I was in high school, he was already at Yale Medical School, making our mother beam with pride during her tennis club luncheons. Stephanie, my sister who is 2 years older than me, excelled in debate and student government before heading to Columbia Law. Her sharp mind and sharper tongue made her the perfect attorney, and Mother never tired of mentioning how Stephanie would likely become the first female partner at her prestigious Manhattan firm before turning 35. Then there was me. From childhood, I gravitated toward colors, shapes, and images rather than textbooks. While Ryan dissected frogs with clinical precision and Stephanie argued intellectual points at the dinner table, I filled sketchbooks with designs and drawings that my mother would find and discard during her cleaning frenzies. Art is a nice hobby, Amber, but it is not a career for someone from our family, became her constant refrain. When I won a statewide art competition in 9th grade, my father patted my shoulder and said, "That is nice, sweetheart," before immediately asking Ryan about his college applications. My certificate ended up in my bedroom drawer while Ryan's science award from 3 years prior still held center stage on the fireplace mantel. The pattern continued through high school. My advanced placement art teacher told my parents I had rare talent during a conference, to which my mother responded, "Yes, but how will that help her get into medical school?" The teacher looked confused while I stared at my shoes, already knowing this battle was unwinnable. Family dinners became exercises in invisibility. My parents and siblings would discuss cases, legal precedents, and hospital politics while I pushed food around my plate. On the rare occasions I attempted to share something about my latest art project, Mother would interject with, "Speaking of accomplishments, did you hear about Ryan's research being published?" By senior year of high school, I had learned to exist in the periphery of my own family. My college acceptance to Parsons School of Design in New York should have been celebrated, but instead prompted a family intervention. Graphic design? What kind of stable future is that? My mother asked, pacing our kitchen in her Louboutin heels. Stephanie was accepted to 3 Ivy League schools. Your brother had a full scholarship. And you want to draw pictures for a living? My father, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict his wife, simply said, "We just want what is best for you, pumpkin." What they meant was they wanted what was best for the family image. I went anyway, funding my education through scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans. Each holiday break became an exercise in emotional endurance. Thanksgiving my freshman year, my mother introduced me to family friends as our daughter who is finding herself in art school, with a tight smile that conveyed her disappointment. Christmas that same year, she gifted me MCT prep books with a note saying it is never too late to transfer to a real program. I donated them to the library unopened. During my sophomore year, when my design was selected for a small but respected advertising campaign, I called home excited. My father answered, listened for approximately 30 seconds before saying, "Your mother is busy with her charity committee." Ryan just matched with his top residency choice. "Can I have you call back later?" I stopped sharing my achievements after that. The geographic distance of New York provided some buffer, but each visit home reinforced my status as the family disappointment. While my siblings received prime bedroom space when visiting, I was often relegated to the converted office with the pull-out sofa. Family photos throughout the house chronicled Ryan and Stephanie's milestones while mine were noticeably absent. After graduation, I secured a position at a boutique design agency in Brooklyn. My starting salary was modest, but the creative freedom was worth it. When I told my parents, my mother said, "Well, I suppose you can always live with roommates indefinitely. Not everyone is meant for success." As my career progressed, I gradually reduced my visits home to major holidays only. Phone calls became shorter, with my mother dominating conversations with updates about my siblings. Ryan's engagement to another doctor warranted a special family dinner I had to miss due to a work deadline, something my mother referenced for months afterward as proof of my lack of family commitment. In the lead-up to last Christmas, I had finally landed a major client, a household name brand that sought me out specifically for their rebranding campaign. The contract was substantial enough that I could finally afford my own apartment without roommates in a decent Brooklyn neighborhood. For once, I had something tangible that even my achievement-oriented family might recognize. My portfolio had expanded, My work had been featured in several industry publications, and I had even been asked to speak at a design conference. After years of doubt, I finally felt secure in my career path and eager, perhaps foolishly, to share this success with my family. Little did I know that this Christmas would become the breaking point of 27 years of accumulated dismissal and disappointment. The week before Christmas, I stood in an upscale Manhattan boutique agonizing over gifts for my family. Each year, I tried to find the perfect presents that might finally earn their approval, as if the right cashmere sweater or limited edition book could make them see me as worthy. For my father, I had found a rare first edition medical text he had once mentioned wanting. The antiquarian bookseller had helped me track it down, and it had cost nearly a full paycheck. For Stephanie, I selected an elegant leather briefcase from a designer she had mentioned in passing. For Ryan and his fiancée, I created a custom illustrated timeline of their relationship, professionally framed. For my mother, I had spent months secretly commissioning a well-known local artist to paint our family home, the backdrop of so many complicated memories. The artist had captured the property in golden summer light, making it look like the perfect family estate my mother always wanted people to see. "You are really going all out this year," commented the saleswoman as she wrapped my final purchase. "It is a special Christmas," I replied, though I could not explain why I still tried so hard to impress people who never seemed impressed. That evening, I called my best friend Taylor, who had witnessed my family dynamics firsthand during college. "Amber, you know I support you, but I am worried," she said after I detailed my gift plans. "Every year you go home thinking this time will be different, and every year you call me crying on December 26th. This year is different," I insisted. "I finally have something concrete to show them. The Norrington account is huge. Even my mother cannot dismiss that." Taylor's sigh carried years of protective frustration. "Just promise me you will not pin your happiness on their reaction. Your work is amazing. Your life is amazing. You do not need their validation." "I know, I lied. I just want to share my success with them. Just remember you can always come to my family's place if things get rough," she offered. "My mom already bought your favorite peppermint ice cream just in case." The drive to Connecticut on December 23rd felt like heading into battle. I rehearsed casual ways to mention my achievements without sounding boastful. The Norrington executives had specifically requested me by name. My designs would be on products nationwide. The contract had allowed me financial independence in one of the world's most expensive cities. Surely that would be enough. The family home looked like a Christmas card, with perfect white lights outlining each architectural feature and a designer wreath on the glossy black door. I parked my used Civic between Ryan's Tesla and Stephanie's Mercedes, already feeling the familiar inadequacy seeping in. My mother answered the door in a festive red sweater, her critical eye immediately scanning me from head to toe. "Amber, you finally made it. Your hair is certainly interesting these days." She reached out to touch my shoulder-length bob, recently dyed with subtle rose gold highlights for a winter wedding I had in my portfolio. "I suppose creative types need to express themselves. Come in before you let all the heat out." No hug. No, I missed you. Just immediate criticism followed by practical concerns about the heating bill. My father emerged from his study, offering a brief one-armed hug. "There is my artistic daughter. Good drive down." Before I could answer, he glanced at his watch. "The Patriots game is about to start. We will catch up at dinner." He disappeared back toward the media room, the conversation already over. I carried my suitcase and carefully wrapped gifts inside, hearing my siblings' voices from the kitchen. When I entered, Ryan looked up from his phone briefly. "Hey sis, good to see you survived another year in the big bad city." Stephanie, arranging a charcuterie board with mathematical precision, offered a tight smile. "The prodigal designer returns. How is that little job of yours going? Still drawing logos for coffee shops?" I forced a smile. "Actually, I just landed the Norrington account. They are completely rebranding and chose my design concept over several major agencies." "Norrington? The grocery store chain?" Ryan asked, his attention still mostly on his phone. "Huh. Do they pay well for that kind of thing?" "It is actually a pretty significant contract," I started to explain. My mother interrupted, thrusting a vegetable peeler into my hand. Amber, since you are just standing there, make yourself useful and help with dinner. Stephanie has been here since morning helping while you slept in and drove up late. I bit back the explanation that I had worked until 2 a.m. finishing projects before taking time off, instead obediently taking over the vegetable preparation. My mother hovered nearby, adjusting the angle of my knife and commenting that I was making the pieces too large, then too small. I never understood why someone who works with visual arts cannot seem to cut a carrot properly, she muttered, eventually taking over the task herself. Later that afternoon, I overheard my mother in the living room as neighbors stopped by with holiday cookies. She proudly showed off Ryan's medical journal with his published research and passed around photos of Stephanie at a legal conference where she had presented. When one neighbor politely asked, "And what about your youngest?" "Amber, right? How is she doing?" I paused in the hallway to listen. "Oh, she is still finding her way," my mother replied with a practiced laugh. "You know how it is with some children. They take longer to settle into something worthwhile." I slipped away before I could hear more, finding my portfolio tucked under a stack of magazines where I had left it on the coffee table earlier, hoping someone might take interest. I quietly returned it to my suitcase. That evening, extended family arrived for a pre-Christmas dinner. My aunt, uncle, and 3 cousins joined us, along with my grandmother. Despite being 27, I found myself seated at the secondary table with my teenage cousins while all the successful adults sat at the main dining table. "So you draw stuff for a living?" my 16-year-old cousin asked between textures. "Graphic design is more complicated than that," I started to explain. "That is cool," he interrupted. "I am thinking of being a YouTuber." I spent the meal answering questions about whether I could help him design his channel logo, while from the main table I heard my mother proudly detailing Ryan's recent promotion and Stephanie's important case. The evening wound down with my father and uncle discussing investment strategies, my mother and aunt comparing notes on their country club's holiday gala, and my siblings receiving eager questions about their professional lives. When my grandmother kindly asked about my work, my mother quickly redirected the conversation to the Christmas Day plans. As I lay in the uncomfortable pull-out bed that night, I scrolled through congratulatory messages from colleagues about the Norrington account, feeling the stark contrast between my professional and family lives. In one world, I was valued and respected. In the other, I was still the disappointment who chose the wrong path. Little did I know that Christmas Day would push this painful dynamic to its breaking point. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. For a brief moment, lying in bed watching ice crystals glitter on the window, I felt a flicker of childlike Christmas excitement. Perhaps today would be different. I had carefully arranged all my gifts under the tree the night before, positioning them prominently with their professional wrapping and thoughtful gift tags. By the time I made it downstairs in my holiday sweater and carefully applied makeup, the family was already gathered in the living room. "Finally decided to join us," my mother commented, checking her watch. "We have been waiting to open gifts, but I suppose creative types need their beauty sleep." I mumbled an apology despite having only slept until 8:30 a.m., taking the last available seat, a footstool near the edge of the family circle. Gift opening began with my father distributing the presents. Ryan and his fiancée Jennifer received several large boxes. Stephanie had a similar pile. My stack consisted of 2 small packages and a gift card envelope. I watched eagerly as my family opened my carefully selected gifts. My father unwrapped the rare medical text with polite interest. "This is quite old," he commented, flipping through a few pages. "Interesting historical perspective, though completely outdated now, of course." "Thank you, Amber." He set it aside without further comment, moving quickly to exclaim over the new golf clubs Stephanie had given him. Stephanie opened her designer briefcase next, examining it with a critical eye. "This is nice, though I just got a new one from the partners last month. The firm uses Smythson exclusively. But this could be a good backup, I suppose." My mother unwrapped the commissioned painting of our house, studying it with pursed lips. "Well, this is certainly colorful," she said finally, though the artist took some liberties with the landscaping. Our hydrangeas are not nearly so prominent. But it was a creative thought. We can hang it in the guest bathroom. Ryan and Jennifer at least seemed genuinely pleased with their custom relationship timeline, though Ryan quickly added, you could probably make good money doing these for people as side gigs if the design work dries up. When my turn came, I opened my gifts to find a generic gift card to a department store from my father, a self-help book titled Finding Your Professional Purpose from my mother, and a basic sweater from Stephanie that still had the clearance tag partially attached. I thought the book might help you finally figure out a sustainable career path, my mother explained. The reviews said it is excellent for people who feel adrift professionally. I forced a smile. Thank you. It looks interesting. I carefully did not mention that I had been at the same design firm for 4 years with regular promotions and raises. After the living room was cleared of wrapping paper, I attempted to bring out my portfolio as everyone settled with coffee. I brought some samples of my recent work, including the Norrington campaign concepts I said, opening the leather folio. They really liked my approach to modernizing their brand while maintaining recognition elements. Speaking of recognition, my mother interrupted. Ryan just had another paper accepted for publication. Tell everyone about it, Ryan. My portfolio sat open on my lap, unviewed, as Ryan detailed his research methodology for 10 minutes. When he finished, I tried again. The Norrington campaign will actually be national. Their products are in almost every state, so my designs will be on packaging across the country. Amber, could you help me in the kitchen? My mother asked, already standing. Stephanie, why do not you show Jennifer the album of Ryan's medical school graduation? I am sure she would love to see it. In the kitchen, I was assigned menial tasks while my mother handled the important cooking aspects. Every suggestion I made was dismissed, every technique questioned. No, not like that, she sighed, taking over the potato mashing. After 27 years, I would think you would know how to properly prepare a simple dish. Later, I overheard my mother on the phone with her sister who could not attend. Ryan is just thriving at the hospital. They are already talking about making him chief resident next year. And Stephanie is working on a case that might set legal precedent. We are so blessed with such accomplished children. A pause. Amber? Yes, she is here too. Still doing the design thing. You know how she is, always marching to her own drummer instead of pursuing something substantial. During a lull in the afternoon activities, I tried to connect with Stephanie as she worked on her laptop in the study. Busy day to be working, I commented, offering her a cup of coffee I had brought. She accepted it without looking up. Some of us have responsibilities that do not pause for holidays. This case could make my career. I understand. My deadline for the Norrington project was intense too. I worked through 3 weekends to perfect the presentation. Stephanie finally looked up, a condescending smile on her face. Amber, let us be real. Making grocery store logos colorful is not quite the same as defending a multinational corporation in a precedent-setting case. It is cute that you enjoy your little job, but please do not equate it with actual professional pressure. I retreated, stung by her dismissal. In the kitchen, I offered to help with dinner preparations again, determined to be useful. I can make the cranberry sauce. I have a great recipe I developed last year. My mother handed me the can opener and a can of store-bought cranberry sauce. We are not experimenting today. Just open this and put it in the crystal dish. When I attempted to arrange it artfully in the dish, my mother sighed dramatically. For goodness sake, Amber, it is cranberry sauce, not one of your art projects. Just put it in the dish normally. As the afternoon progressed, the kitchen became more chaotic with dinner preparations. When I tried to help baste the turkey, my mother swooped in. The last time you handled the turkey, it was dry as sandpaper. I will do this. Mom, that was 10 years ago when I was 17, I protested. And clearly you have not spent the intervening time learning to cook properly, she replied. Some skills actually matter in life. The final straw came when I accidentally knocked over a measuring cup of broth while reaching for a utensil. It splashed onto the counter but not onto any food. My mother reacted as though I had set the kitchen on fire. This is why I cannot trust you with important tasks. Go set the table or something. At least try not to break the good china. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, fighting tears of frustration. I texted Taylor, "It is worse than ever. Nothing I do is right. Nothing I am is enough." She replied immediately, "Remember who you are outside of that house. The Amber I know is talented, successful, and strong. Do not let them make you forget that. Stand your ground." Taking a deep breath, I fixed my makeup and returned downstairs, determined to make it through the evening with my dignity intact. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. By 6 o'clock, the dining room had transformed into a holiday masterpiece. The table gleamed with my mother's best china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier overhead. Polished silver flatware flanked each plate with military precision. The centerpiece featured fresh pine boughs, red candles, and artfully arranged ornaments that perfectly complemented the room's color scheme. The doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of our extended family. Grandparents Wilson, my father's parents, entered first. Grandmother in her elegant emerald dress, grandfather leaning slightly on his cane, but still commanding respect. My mother's sister Aunt Carol and her husband Uncle Peter followed with their 2 college-aged children. My mother's brother Uncle James, his wife Aunt Diane, and their teenage son completed the group. I helped take coats and made polite small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of my work after the day's earlier rejections. Everyone gradually migrated to the living room for pre-dinner drinks and appetizers. Aunt Diane, always the kindest of the extended family, sought me out by the fireplace. "Amber, honey, I have not seen you since last Christmas. Tell me what you have been up to. Still creating beautiful designs?" Her genuine interest warmed me, and I cautiously shared some details about my recent projects. "Actually, I just landed a major account with Norrington. They're a national brand looking to modernize while keeping their recognition elements. It was quite competitive." "That sounds impressive. I always knew you had special talent. Is your work going to be in stores across the country then?" she asked, her eyes showing actual interest. Before I could answer, my mother appeared with a tray of canapés. "Diane, let me tell you about Ryan's latest publication. He is revolutionizing approaches to cardiac care. Amber, would you check if your father needs help with the wine?" As I walked away, I heard my mother smoothly redirecting the conversation to my brother's accomplishments. My moment of connection had been swiftly severed. Dinner was announced at 7, and everyone found their assigned seats. I noticed I had been placed at the far end of the table, while Ryan and Stephanie flanked my parents near the head. The seating arrangement itself told a story about family hierarchy. My father stood for the traditional family toast, crystal glass raised. "To another blessed year for the Wilson family. We are proud to celebrate Ryan's groundbreaking research and upcoming chief residency appointment." Ryan nodded modestly as approving murmurs circulated. "And to Stephanie," my father continued, "whose brilliant legal mind continues to impress everyone at her firm, with partnership on the horizon." Stephanie smiled, accepting the acknowledgement as her due. My father scanned the table, his eyes briefly meeting mine before moving on. "And to all of us gathered here, Merry Christmas." No mention of my accomplishments. Not even a generic acknowledgement. The omission hung in the air like an unacknowledged ghost, at least to me. Everyone else seemed not to notice as they clinked glasses and began passing dishes. Conversation flowed around topics that highlighted my siblings' achievements. Ryan discussed hospital politics. Stephanie debated recent Supreme Court decisions with my grandfather. When I attempted to join a discussion about marketing trends, my mother smoothly redirected. "Speaking of marketing, Ryan's hospital is implementing an innovative patient outreach program. Tell them about it, dear." Halfway through the meal, Uncle James, who worked in business development, innocently opened a door to disaster. "I noticed Norrington stores are getting a complete rebrand. Their old logo was getting quite dated. Good move on their part." I smiled, seeing a natural opening. "Actually, I am leading that rebranding effort. They selected my design concepts over several major agencies." A brief moment of surprised silence followed. "Well, that is certainly something," Uncle James replied, looking genuinely impressed. "That is a major national chain. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, feeling a small glow of validation. "It is the biggest account I have handled independently." The rollout starts next quarter. Speaking of next quarter, my mother interjected, Stephanie will be arguing before the federal appeals court. That is quite an achievement for someone her age. Uncle James, however, seemed genuinely interested in my work. How did you land such a big client, Amber? That must have been quite competitive. Before I could answer, Uncle Peter joined in. James raises a good point. Wilson family members have always contributed significantly to their fields. I am curious how everyone is building on their family legacy. He looked around the table. Ryan is clearly advancing medical science like his father. Stephanie is making waves in law. Amber, what would you say is your contribution to the family's professional standing? The question hung in the air for a moment. I opened my mouth to answer, to finally explain how I was building my own success and reputation in my field, when my mother's voice cut through the silence. She is the most useless child we have. The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples of uncomfortable silence spread around the table. Some nervous laughter followed, as though assuming she had made a poor joke. But my mother's expression held no humor, only a dismissive certainty that froze my blood. Grandmother Wilson's fork clattered against her plate. Aunt Diane drew in a sharp breath. Ryan suddenly became intensely interested in his mashed potatoes. Stephanie at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. My father cleared his throat, but said nothing to contradict or soften the statement. The room seemed to tilt around me. 27 years of dismissal, criticism, and emotional neglect crystallized in that single moment of brutal clarity. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my fork. Time seemed to slow as memories cascaded through my mind, art projects removed from the refrigerator to make room for Ryan's awards. My mother forgetting to attend my high school art showcase while driving 2 hours for Stephanie's debate tournament. College tuition discussions that excluded my chosen major as not a real investment. Every backhanded compliment, every comparison, every diminishment of my choices and accomplishments. I saw with perfect clarity how I had spent my entire life seeking approval from people who had decided long ago that my path had no value. How I had twisted myself into knots trying to translate my successes into terms they might respect. How I had accepted the role of family disappointment without questioning whether I was actually disappointing at all. In that crystalline moment of awareness, I faced a choice: continue absorbing the hurt or finally stand up for myself. For once, I chose myself. I placed my napkin beside my plate and slowly stood. The dining room fell completely silent. All eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from my mother's irritation to my grandmother's concern to my cousin's wide-eyed fascination. My heart pounded so hard I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. My mouth felt dry. But beneath the anxiety flowed a current of calm certainty. For perhaps the first time in my family's presence, I knew exactly who I was and what I needed to say. For 27 years, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, I have tried to earn your approval by your standards. Today I realized that was never going to happen, and more importantly, it does not need to. My mother's face tightened. Amber, do not be dramatic. This is hardly the time for one of your emotional displays. Actually, Mom, this is exactly the time, I continued calmly. You just called me useless in front of our entire family. If not now, when would be appropriate to address that? I turned to face the table more fully. I have built a successful career doing what I love. The Norrington account that none of you seem interested in hearing about will put my designs in every state in America. I was selected over agencies with decades more experience because my work stood out. Last month, I was a featured speaker at the National Design Conference. My portfolio has been published in industry magazines. I have built a client list that allows me to live independently in one of the most expensive cities in the country. I looked directly at my siblings. Ryan, Stephanie, I have always supported and celebrated your achievements. I have listened to detailed accounts of medical procedures and legal briefs. I have shared your accomplishments with my friends. Yet neither of you has ever once asked to see my portfolio or expressed genuine interest in my work. Ryan had the grace to look ashamed, while Stephanie maintained a neutral expression. I turned to my father. Dad, you taught us that success comes from dedication and excellence. I have dedicated myself to excellence in my field, yet you have never acknowledged that my path could be valid too. Your silence when Mom dismisses my career has been as hurtful as her words. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unable to meet my eyes. To be clear, I continued, addressing the whole table now, I am not asking for special praise or acknowledgement. I am simply asking for the same respect given to other adults at this table. My career path is different, not lesser. My success looks different, not smaller. My mother attempted to interrupt again, but Grandmother Wilson raised a hand to stop her. I do not need your approval anymore, I said directly to my mother. What I needed was your support, your interest, your willingness to see me for who I am rather than who you wanted me to be. I needed a mother who could be proud of a daughter who found her own path rather than following a prescribed one. My voice remained level, though emotion threatened to break through. Do you know what is truly useless? Spending your life trying to please people who have decided in advance that you cannot. That is what I have been doing, and it stops today. I paused, looking at each family member in turn. I love all of you. I value this family. But I will no longer accept being treated as less than, being seated at the far end of the table both literally and figuratively in our family dynamic. Grandmother Wilson nodded slightly, her eyes bright with what looked like pride. If my worth to this family is measured only by how closely my life matches your predetermined expectations, then you have all missed knowing a person who has much to offer. That is your loss, not mine. My mother's face had transformed from irritation to a cold anger. Are you quite finished with this performance? You have always had a flair for the dramatic. This is exactly why your father and I worried about your career choice. Everything becomes an emotional spectacle with you. No, Julia, Grandmother Wilson interjected firmly. Amber is making perfect sense, and you would do well to listen. The unexpected support from my traditionally reserved grandmother momentarily stunned the table into silence. I took a deep breath. I do not need you to suddenly understand or appreciate my career. What I need, what I am establishing right now, is a boundary. I will be treated with respect, or I will not be present. It is that simple. Uncle James cleared his throat. I think what Amber has accomplished sounds remarkable. I would actually love to hear more about how you approach the Norrington rebrand. My mother cut in sharply. James, do not encourage this behavior. Amber has always been sensitive and prone to exaggeration. This outburst is exactly why we worry about her emotional stability. Mom, I said quietly, this attempt to paint me as unstable rather than addressing what you said is exactly the problem. I am not overreacting to being called useless by my own mother at Christmas dinner. I looked around at my family one more time. I came here hoping to share my joy and success with the people I love. Instead, I was reminded why I have gradually reduced my visits home. I deserve better, and until that is possible, I need to protect myself. With those words, I stepped back from the table. I will be packing my things and returning to New York tonight. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. As I walked from the dining room with as much dignity as I could muster, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, one I had carried for so long I had forgotten it was there. For the first time in my family home, I felt truly free. Upstairs in my temporary bedroom, I methodically packed my suitcase, hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline. The house below had erupted into a buzz of voices after my departure, though I could not make out individual conversations. I focused on folding my clothes neatly, tucking away my toiletries, and gathering the few personal items I had brought. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Alyssa. What you just did was badass. For what it is worth, I think your design work sounds amazing. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. The unexpected support brought tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. I was determined not to break down, at least not until I was safely away from this house. A soft knock at the door interrupted my packing. I expected my mother, ready with recriminations about ruining Christmas. Instead, my father stood in the doorway, looking older and more uncertain than I had ever seen him. Amber, he began hesitantly. You do not need to leave tonight. The roads will be icy, and it is getting late. I need to go, Dad, I replied, continuing to pack. I cannot stay in this house tonight. He stepped into the room, closing the door partially behind him. What your mother said was wrong. I should have said something immediately. But you did not, I responded, not unkindly. You never do. Your mother has strong opinions about success, he offered weakly. Dad, this is not about different opinions. She called me useless in front of our entire family. That goes beyond having high standards or different values. He sighed heavily, sitting on the edge of the bed. I have always admired your courage, you know. Following your passion despite our reservations. Admiration without support is not particularly helpful, I said, zipping my suitcase closed. I needed parents who could see my worth even if it looked different than they expected. I failed you there, he admitted quietly. We both did, in different ways. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. I lifted my suitcase from the bed. I love you, Dad. But I need to create some distance right now. I will call when I get back to the city. As I moved toward the door, another knock sounded. Ryan stood there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Can I talk to you for a minute? He asked. My father nodded and slipped out, leaving Ryan and me alone. My brother closed the door and leaned against it. So that was quite a dinner speech. Not how I planned to spend Christmas, I replied. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture from childhood that made him momentarily look like the brother I had once been close to. Look, I know I have been a jerk. Self-absorbed. I just wanted to say, I get it more than you might think. Get what, exactly? The pressure. The expectations. He hesitated. Sometimes I wonder if I even wanted medicine or if I just followed the path of least resistance. You had the courage to choose differently. I set down my suitcase, surprised by this glimpse of vulnerability from my always confident brother. Mom and Dad practically mapped out my entire life, he continued. Medical school, specialty, even the kind of person I should marry. Sometimes I envy your freedom to build your own life. To choose your own definition of success. It has not felt very free, I admitted. Not when it came with constant disapproval. Ryan nodded. I should have stood up for you more. Been more interested in your work. The truth is, I barely understand what I want, let alone having the courage to pursue it like you have. This confession from my seemingly perfect brother left me momentarily speechless. It is not too late to figure that out, I finally said. Even Dr. Perfect is allowed to question his choices. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Maybe. Anyway, I just wanted you to know I think what you said down there was long overdue. And I am sorry for my part in making you feel less than. He awkwardly extended his hand for a handshake, then changed his mind and gave me a brief, stiff hug before retreating from the room. Downstairs, I could hear my mother's voice rising in indignation. She has always been dramatic, turning a simple comment into a federal case and ruining Christmas dinner. I shouldered my bag and descended the stairs, prepared for a final confrontation. In the foyer, Grandmother Wilson intercepted me. My dear, she said, taking my hands in her papery ones, it took courage to say what you did. Your grandfather and I are very proud of the woman you have become. Thank you, I whispered, fighting tears again. Your mother is complicated. She struggles to see beyond her narrow view of success. That is her limitation, not yours. With a gentle squeeze of my hands, she let me go. I moved toward the door, where my mother now stood with arms crossed. So you are really leaving on Christmas night, she said, her tone making it an accusation. Destroying our family dinner was not enough? Mom, I did not destroy anything. I simply stood up for myself after years of dismissal culminating in being called useless. You are twisting my words, she insisted. It was a momentary comment, not some grand statement on your worth. A momentary comment that perfectly summarized how you have made me feel my entire life, I replied calmly. I am not angry anymore, just clear about what I need going forward. And what exactly is that? She asked coldly. Respect. Basic human respect for my choices, my accomplishments, and my path. Without that, we cannot have a healthy relationship. She scoffed. So dramatic. Always making everything about your feelings. Goodbye, Mom. I will call when I am ready. I stepped around her and walked out the front door into the cold December night. The drive back to New York through light snow gave me hours to process what had happened. Tears came intermittently, but underneath the sadness was a foundation of certainty. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, a reclamation of my own worth that could not be undone. I arrived at my apartment after midnight, dropping my bags in the entryway and collapsing onto my couch. Only then did I allow myself to fully feel everything: grief for the supportive family I had never had, anger at years of dismissal, relief at finally standing up for myself, and, underneath it all, a surprising sense of freedom. The next morning, my phone was flooded with texts and missed calls. My mother had sent several messages, each more accusatory than the last, culminating in, "I hope you are satisfied with ruining Christmas for everyone. When you are ready to apologize for your behavior, we can discuss moving forward." Stephanie had sent a single text that was completely unnecessary and selfish. "Mom is upset and Dad is disappointed. Way to make Christmas about you." There were also messages from extended family members. "Aunt I and expressed support. You said what needed saying for years. Here if you need to talk." Uncle James asked if I would be willing to show him my portfolio sometime. Cousins sent varying messages of support or confusion. After reading through everything, I made a decision. I blocked my mother's number, at least temporarily. I needed space to process without her attempts to make me doubt myself or accept blame for her behavior. When I returned to work after the holiday, my colleagues immediately noticed something different. "You seem lighter somehow," my work friend Zoe commented. "Good Christmas." Clarifying, I replied with a small smile. "Very clarifying." My boss called me into her office that afternoon. "The Norrington team sent over the most glowing feedback about your presentation. They specifically mentioned your confidence and clear vision. I am officially moving you to lead designer on all their implementations with a corresponding raise." Rather than downplaying the achievement as I might have before, I simply said, "Thank you. I worked hard on that proposal and I am excited to see it through." She studied me for a moment. "Something is different about you, Amber. Whatever it is, it suits you." In the weeks that followed, I declined an invitation to my cousin's birthday celebration, the first family event after Christmas. Instead of making excuses, I was honest. I am taking some space from family gatherings while establishing healthier boundaries. I would love to meet you one-on-one for coffee sometime. To my surprise, several relatives respected this boundary and reached out individually. Connections I had thought were wholly dependent on family gatherings began to evolve into more authentic relationships. With each passing day, I felt my confidence growing, not just professionally, but personally. The constant background radiation of seeking approval had diminished, leaving room for clearer thinking and more genuine self-expression. The most unexpected change was in how I viewed my own success. Without the distorting lens of my family's judgment, I could finally see my accomplishments clearly. I was good at what I did. I had built a career I loved. That was enough, whether anyone in my family could recognize it or not. 3 months after the Christmas dinner confrontation, I sat across from my therapist, Dr. Marshall, in her sunlit office overlooking a small park just coming into spring bloom. "So today marks our 12th session," she noted, checking her notes. "When you first came in January, you described feeling both liberated and terrified after standing up to your family. How would you describe your feelings now?" I considered her question carefully. "More settled. Like I am standing on solid ground for the first time in my adult life. I still have moments of doubt and guilt, but they are less frequent and less intense." After the Christmas incident, I had realized I needed professional help to process decades of family dynamics. Weekly therapy had become my anchor as I navigated the complex aftermath of my confrontation. "You mentioned your father reached out again," she prompted. I nodded. "He wants to meet for lunch next week. Just the two of us." My relationship with my father had taken an unexpected turn. After several tentative phone conversations, he had begun to acknowledge his role in enabling my mother's behavior. Our communications were still awkward, but increasingly authentic. He admitted last week that he always respected my creativity, but never knew how to express it when my mother was so dismissive. "It is not an excuse, but it helps me understand him better." "And how are you feeling about seeing him one-on-one?" "Cautiously optimistic," I replied. "He seems genuinely interested in getting to know me as I am, not as they wanted me to be." He even asked for the link to my professional website and actually looked at my portfolio. The lunch with my father the following week proved surprisingly meaningful. He arrived at the restaurant with a copy of the design magazine that had featured my work. "I got a subscription," he explained somewhat sheepishly. "I want to understand your world better." Over pasta, he spoke more openly than he ever had. "I failed you as a father, Amber. I let your mother's narrow definition of success dictate how we treated all of you. Ryan is showing signs of burnout. Stephanie works constantly but never seems happy, and we nearly lost our relationship with you completely. Why did you never intervene?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. He sighed deeply. "The path of least resistance. Your mother has always been formidable. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself her way was right. That success had to look a certain way. It was easier than questioning our choices. For the first time, I saw my father as a flawed human rather than an authority figure, someone who had made mistakes but was trying, however imperfectly, to make amends. As we parted, he hugged me properly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. "I am proud of you, Amber. Not just for your success, but for your courage to live authentically. I wish I had had half your bravery at your age." 2 weeks later, Ryan surprised me by visiting New York. He texted on a Friday afternoon, "In the city for a conference. Dinner tonight." We met at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment. The initial awkwardness gradually gave way to the most honest conversation we had ever had. "I have been thinking a lot about what you said at Christmas," he admitted over dessert. "About following your own path. I have been doing some soul searching about medicine." "Having doubts?" I asked. "Not about medicine itself. I do love the work. But the specialization, the hospital politics, the relentless pressure to publish and advance. Sometimes I wonder if I would be happier in a small practice focusing on patient care." "That sounds like a Ryan I have never met before," I said with a small smile. "Yeah, well, watching my little sister stand up for her choices made me realize I should examine my own." He hesitated. "I broke up with Jennifer." "What?" "Why? I thought you two were heading toward marriage. She fit the perfect doctor's wife mold. Looked good on paper. But after Christmas, I started asking myself if I actually loved her or if she was just another checkbox on the approved life plan." He shook his head ruefully. "Turns out, I did not even know what I wanted in a relationship because I had never really thought about it independently. As the evening progressed, it felt like meeting a new version of my brother, one who was questioning and vulnerable rather than confidently following a prescribed path. Before leaving, he asked to see my workspace. In my small home office, he studied my design boards and sketches with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly trying to understand my world. "You know," he said as he was leaving, "I always thought you were brave. Even when I was winning all the approval, part of me envied your willingness to follow your own star." My relationship with Stephanie took longer to shift. Her loyalty to our mother ran deep, and she initially maintained that I had overreacted at Christmas. But even she could not ignore reality forever. In April, my work for Norrington was featured in a major business publication highlighting successful rebranding campaigns. The article mentioned me by name and included an interview discussing my design philosophy. Stephanie texted a screenshot of the article with a brief message, "Saw this today. Impressive work." It was hardly effusive, but from Stephanie, it represented a significant acknowledgement. A week later, she called. "I need some design advice for a presentation to the partners," she began without preamble. "Your corporate work is actually quite relevant to what I am trying to communicate." As we discussed her presentation, something subtle shifted between us. For the first time, she was approaching me as a professional with valuable expertise rather than a lesser sibling who had chosen an inferior path. "The article about your work was really good," she admitted before hanging up. Mother saw it too, though she would never say so. My mother remained the most resistant to change. For 2 months after Christmas, we had no direct communication. I maintained my boundary, keeping her number blocked while I focused on my own healing. In March, I finally unblocked her, though I did not immediately reach out. A week later, she called. "Amber," she began formally, "I think this silence has gone on long enough. Your father says you are refusing to attend Easter unless certain conditions are met. Not conditions, Mom. Boundaries. I need acknowledgement of how your words and actions have affected me and a commitment to more respectful treatment going forward. She sighed audibly. You have always been sensitive. I simply have high standards for all my children. That is not an apology or acknowledgement, Mom. That is continuing to blame me for having reasonable feelings about being called useless. The conversation ended in a stalemate, but something had changed. For the first time, I had maintained my boundary without emotional turmoil. Her disapproval no longer devastated me. Easter approached, the next major family gathering. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Marshall, I decided to attend, but with clear boundaries in place. I emailed the entire family. I will be attending Easter dinner. I look forward to seeing everyone and request that we focus on connecting respectfully as adults. If critical or dismissive comments occur, I will calmly leave rather than engage in conflict. The Easter gathering proved to be a turning point. My mother, while not openly apologetic, made visible efforts to moderate her behavior. When Aunt Diane asked about my work, my mother did not interrupt or redirect the conversation. When I brought a portfolio to show interested relatives, she remained neutral rather than dismissive. It was far from perfect, but it was progress. The most telling moment came when Uncle James mentioned the business article featuring my work. I showed it to colleagues at my firm, he said. Really impressive rebranding strategy. You have a good eye for maintaining brand recognition while modernizing. My mother, pouring coffee nearby, paused almost imperceptibly before saying, Amber has always had an eye for visual elements, even as a child. It was not exactly effusive praise, but from my mother, this neutral acknowledgement represented a seismic shift. As spring turned to summer, my professional life continued to flourish. The Norrington campaign launched nationwide to positive industry response. My raise allowed me to move to a slightly larger apartment with a dedicated office space. I began mentoring junior designers at the firm, discovering a talent for nurturing others' creative development. More importantly, I continued building what my therapist called my chosen family, friends and colleagues who appreciated me for exactly who I was. Taylor remained my steadfast supporter, but my circle expanded to include other creative professionals, neighbors, and even a few colleagues who became close friends. In June, I met Daniel, a children's book illustrator who approached creativity with the same passion I did. Our relationship developed naturally, without the constant anxiety I had felt with previous partners about whether they would meet my family's approval. When Daniel eventually did meet some of my family at a casual dinner, he observed afterward, I can see why you struggled with them for so long. The undercurrents are intense. But you handle it with such grace now. The greatest gift of the Christmas confrontation was the freedom to define success on my own terms. I had always thought I wanted my family's approval, but what I actually needed was my own approval, free from their distorting influence. My mother would likely never fully understand or validate my choices. My father was trying in his imperfect way. My siblings were on their own journeys of self-discovery. But for the first time, my well-being did not depend on any of them changing. Looking back, that devastating comment at Christmas dinner had become an unexpected gift of clarity. It forced me to see what had always been true but too painful to acknowledge. I could not make people value what they were determined to dismiss. My only power lay in valuing myself and creating boundaries that protected that self-worth. The journey of healing family relationships is never truly complete. There would always be difficult moments, old patterns that threatened to reemerge, new boundaries to establish. But I was no longer the insecure daughter desperately seeking validation. I was Amber Wilson, successful designer, loyal friend, and a woman who finally understood that her worth was never dependent on others' ability to recognize it. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to stop trying to earn love that should be freely given. In standing up at that Christmas dinner, I had finally given myself the acceptance I had spent a lifetime seeking from others. And that, perhaps, was the greatest design I would ever create, a life built on self-respect and authentic connection, rather than the shifting sands of others' approval. Have you ever had to stand up to family who could not see your worth? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult family dynamics. Remember that your worth is never dependent on others' recognition of it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own path to self-acceptance.